guys, what's up? It's Jeremy Till here with CrossFit Central and Lift Off Body. We're here with Jake Thompson with Compete Every Day. We're really excited about this because we believe there's a message for a specific time, and we believe Jake has, been an author to produce a book for right now that's going to be so vital for people figuring out what is next for them in the moment and maybe even in their future. So it's pretty cool to be able to be here with him. We've been able to build a relationship probably almost over the last decade. So there's been
it's been back to your sick fit days, man. The old school fittest games at Burnett.
Yep. So almost coming on a decade. So that's cool to be able to now, as an entrepreneur, business person, fitness, pursuit to build relationships with people and see us grow into who we are today. As always, I'm big on long-term relationships. So it's cool to see you grow. And of course, my family has grown as well and everything we've done. So with that, thanks for coming on, Jake, and being with us today. And let's talk about Compete.
Man, thanks. Yeah, I'm excited to be here. It's been really fun on my end as well to watch you guys continue to grow, and just knowing you and all the conversations we've had over the last decade of how those have changed and your focus, and seeing where your heart is, especially now, where you're trying to do with Liftoff, what you're trying to do with CFC, and just the passion behind helping others. It's been cool. It's been cool to see that transition because, man, when we first met, you were the athlete, you were the alpha dog with Sick Fit. It was like, man, we're going to be that. Now it's funny how that, just even from the outside watching in our conversations, it's shifted to where it's really gone from that athlete to life coach, essentially, of how can I just help others? How can I take this experience, this platform, this community, and just help other people enrich their lives, which is fun, and which is why I think we're still friends and still connected all these years.
Yeah, man, I think it's been great. I've always been committed to getting a little feedback there. Committed to the self-development and growth. And, as I saw the limitations to, where I was from the athletic competitor standpoint and where I wanted to go in life, there was just a lot of limitations that I was bumping up against. And so, as I've continued to commit to personal development and growth, I've evolved. I'm a father now, and now, I've seen that there's what I've seen in this time that we're in right now with COVID-19 and where we are with our community. There's the maxim, the more people you can help get what they want and desire, you will, in return, get what you want. And I always believed in that maxim, but there was some sort of wall or border between me and really living that. And really, you talk about me like shaved my head. I was like that. Like probably 2 weeks ago, I made a decision that I wanted to live from that statement and see, because right now I feel like I have nothing to lose and everything to lose. And it's fine. I've been through good times, I've been through bad times, but this has set the table for a brand new beginning. And if I can just come out and help as many people as possible and believe that I'm providing value, that the return will be much greater. And so I'm really wanting to live from that each and every day and through relationships. So it's a really great time.
Love it, man. Love it. Well, and we have that similar mindset with mine. It's you go through those highs and those lows, and it's through those experiences, if you're learning. It's funny, like you said, you have everything to lose but also you have everything to gain. You have nothing to lose and nothing to gain. It's a weird perspective where it's almost peace. We're going to get through this. I'm optimistic something good is going to come from it. And if this gets more challenging, I'm optimistic I'm going to learn something from it and continue to grow and help others. And that completely changes the dynamic of a day-to-day life. And part of it we touch on in the book, but it's different when you're focusing on that, because when you're focused on yourself and bad times hit, man, you just get into a hole. And I can say that from personal experiences of just overwhelmed, dealing with debt and everything else that goes into business sometimes. Of, man, when you're solely focused on yourself, it pours on you and just keeps adding on that pressure. and you can't help anyone else because all you care about is like, how do I get myself out of this? How do I get myself out of this? And the crazy part is the way you get yourself out of that spot is by stopping, instead of looking at yourself and woe is me and how can I, what am I going to do? You start looking at other people and saying, how can I just help you? And maybe if I help you, this is going to get me a little bit farther. And that's ultimately what it's about. And that Zig Ziglar quote about, you get successful by helping other people find their success. Like that is so true. And I've seen it so much in person over the last decade that, man, it just wants to fire you up to say, how do I get my attention less off of me and more onto others?
Absolutely. Well, kind of transitioning into that, I have your book right here, which is awesome. Congratulations on the
Thank you.
Publishing of this. And I imagine when you were writing it, you had no idea what time that we would come into when this comes into publishing. So, I mean, it seems like it's such a phenomenal time to be able to help people through this book. So tell us about the book. Yeah.
So it's funny you say that from a timing perspective, because initially this book would have been out at the end of last year. It would have been out. And what happened is I had, for 5 years, my team was like, you got to write a book. You got to write a book. You got to write a book. You're putting out all this stuff. And as I was kind of sharing with you before, like I dealt with everything: imposter syndrome, self-limiting beliefs. I wasn't the one to write it. Nobody cares. I'm not as good as these other people. Like I just made excuses and procrastinated. And eventually I got to a point where I couldn't make those excuses anymore. Like if I was truly committed to where I wanted to go from a career standpoint, and really our mission at Compete of helping people build this competitor mindset, if I was actually committed to it, then I had to write the book. There was no ifs, ands, or buts. And so I sat down at opening day of baseball season last year, posted it on social and said, I'm going to have this done by World Series. Here's my commitment online. Keep me on track. And so I had a sticky note, had my deadline. And so every day I wrote. And I wrote about 40 to 45,000 words of the book. And I printed it and I edited it. And I wasn't happy with it. I said, something's not here. Something's missing. It sucks. Like you always deal with it as an author that you think your work sucks, but there was a hole. And I got asked by Big Brothers Big Sisters last summer to keynote their event. And as I'm thinking through it, I'm thinking, well, my main corporate talk is for adults. It's corporate setting. It's business and teams. I have kids. I have kids 7 to 17 and I have adults. So I need something that's catchy enough to keep the kids' attention and deep enough to quench the adults' thirst. And so I looked through my original manuscript and looked at my original keynote, and I said, man, this isn't it. And so I was like, if I could just teach a kid 7 lessons, what are the 7 things you need to do to build a competitor mindset that's 100% in your control? What are they? So I scribbled them down. And as I'm looking at that list, I had a little John Maxwell book beside me. And I looked at it and I flipped through John's book and I said, oh my gosh, this is John's blueprint. This is how he does it. He builds his list and then he writes his book on it. So this is the book. So I scrapped about 40,000 words and restarted. And the only way I can describe that is CrossFit style. It's like getting in the 4th round of a workout. You go all out on a 400-meter run. You knock out thrusters or cleans. You finish, you throw the bar down, you say time, you're smoked. And then you look at the whiteboard and realize there's 5 rounds and not 4. And you stare at that bar because the last thing you want to do is pick it up again and go run again. And it's all you can do to just do it. And that was me in that moment. But that was also the most fulfilling part of it for me because I said, man, I'm committed. Like in the commitment, you got to get it. You got to get that 5th round done. And so that delay of that 2 to 3 month period of me having to rewrite it actually put us on a timeline to where the book came out now and actually ahead of schedule. We were initially scheduled for June to get the copies in hand, which would have pushed our release date to the fall. But because of COVID, a lot of the production shifted. We got copies in mid-April, and now we're able to send out early copies with an official release date in June. And so the timing was, I would say, a little bit divine in that, because the book is about what if the key to our success wasn't the things outside of our control, things like our talent and lucky breaks and who you were born to. What if the actual key to getting where we want to in life came down to things that are 100% in our control, like our choices? And so the book is all about what are the 7 key choices that I have seen successful people make. And in the book, I use a little bit of my own story and experiences and how I learned certain things. And then a lot of what are the blueprints for success that we miss, and how do we put in the work for those things? And the timing is funny. Michael Jordan's documentary was the other night that started The Last Dance, which is amazing. But one of the things we've always talked about with Jordan as the greatest of all time is, he failed. He was cut from his varsity squad as a sophomore, and how that drove him to be great. And in the documentary, his high school coaches are like, yeah, he was cut. He also grew 5 inches between his sophomore and his junior year. And I started seeing people being like, oh, that's a lucky break. Like, that's why, he got here and da-da-da. And I was like, well, no. I was like, he could have, Jordan, when he was cut, went home, told his mom, and his mom was like, you got to work harder. And he went and worked and busted his tail and changed his skill set. If he hadn't grown 5 inches, he still would have been a dramatically better player and would have made the varsity. If he hadn't done the work and grown 5 inches, he might not have still made the varsity and never been anything. So it was his choice to do the work and outwork his talent level that put him in a position when a lucky break like a growth spurt hit, that he was able to seize it. And the same applies to us during this time of COVID. A lot of us have extra time on our hands. We're not traveling for work. We're not, the hour we might spend commuting to the gym, we can now go into our garage, get a quick workout, and we've saved an hour back in the house. How are we using that extra time? Are we making the choices that align us with the person we want to be and the places we want to go? And so that's really the heart of it, is getting into those choices, because more than anything, I just don't want people to make the mistakes I made of believing success and where we want to be comes down to a lucky break or being a quote unquote cool kid in the in crowd, but really comes down to our choices and commitments and things within our control.
So, what I think could be challenging for people in this time is to where do I start? And what am I trying to accomplish? Because we know when we play sports or we're doing something very, there's this finite target that we're going for. Right now, it's kind of like this, okay, where do I start? What do I do? So what would be your suggestion in how to get started?
Yeah. So in one of the chapters of the book, it's called Embrace the Process. And really the point of that process is, for a lot of us, if we have that target, we make the mistake of only looking at that target. And once we start, or once we get stuck in COVID and suddenly we can't go as fast to that goal, or we have more obstacles in our way, we lose the motivation and we give up. It's the same way if in a fitness standpoint, you join the gym day one, you expect all this crazy change, you get a little bit of growth, and then you start to stagnate a little bit from a weight loss or growth perspective. And a lot of people just trail off and quit at that point because they're so fixated on that final outcome versus embracing the day-to-day process and how can I show up and just get better today, whether it's listening to a podcast, reading a book, going on a workout, how can I get better today? And so for those of us that don't have that target, we don't have that specific goal yet, it's okay. What we do have in mind and what we should have in mind is, who do we want to become? What is the type of person do I want to be? Do I want to be someone more disciplined, more empathetic? Do I want to be more patient with my spouse or my kids? Do I want to be more productive, maybe wasting less time on social? And if you've never done that before, the challenge is write down that list. Make a list of characteristics of, if I could snap my fingers and become this version of myself in 5 years, what would they look like? And once you have a clear picture of that, well, then you can start asking yourself, what does this person do on a day-to-day basis? Well, maybe when they're driving to work, instead of listening to sports talk, complain about the local team, maybe they're listening to a podcast on growth mindset or nutrition or something in their interest level. Maybe instead of hitting that snooze button, this person's getting up that 30 minutes early to go for a walk outside. It's really, if you don't know from a goal, from a career standpoint, then ask yourself, who do you want to become? Because what I think the biggest challenge for a lot of us is, especially in the fitness community, is we understand growth from a physical standpoint. We understand if I train, if I eat clean, if I show up consistently, I'm going to get results. I'm going to improve my skills. I'm going to improve my body mass index, my body fat percentage. All of that's going to get better by doing the work. But we fail to see how that same thing applies to our life. Like, there's a disconnect for a lot of us. And I can say that because I had growth mindset in sports, and I was fixed mindset in a lot of areas of life. I avoided challenges. I hated being put in a position where I could fail. I liked my comfort zone, but they're really one and the same. And so if we understand it from nutrition and fitness, How can we take that same thing in our life? How can we consistently spend 10 minutes reading every day? How can we have a genuine conversation with someone in our life every day to deepen that relationship? So that's really where the book comes in as well, is not only talking about embracing the process, but looking at who we want to be and taking that growth mindset that a lot of us had in sports and physical fitness and saying, how does this translate in life? Because that's the accelerator. It's great when we go in the gym and do it, but man, if you can start taking that with your career, with your relationships, with your life, it opens up a whole new world for us.
So kind of with looking at the book, I got the book yesterday, so I've been getting through the front end of it and reading it. And the thing that comes up for me is like, I think of myself as a competitor and I compete. For the person that's like, well, this isn't for me. Like, I'm not a competitor. I'm just Jeremy. And so how do you see that working? Because people might have a different, thought to what competing means.
Yeah, and that's usually something I have to address in almost every one of my talks, because people have that. They see compete and they're like, whoa, I don't like sports. I don't like to compete against others. I'm good. But the whole point that I've tried to make with the brand, and the point that's really driven home in the book, is it's not about me versus you. It's not about you versus anyone else. It's about you versus you. And it's about you competing against your own previous best and just asking yourself, can I do a little bit better today? Can I raise the bar just 1%? Because ultimately, the last thing we want in life is to get to the end of our life and realize we cheated ourselves, that we left money on the table, essentially. Bronnie Ware, in her book, The 5 Regrets of the Dying, she talks about, she interviewed all these people in hospice. And the one thing that stood out, the number one regret, is all these people lived a life that everybody else wanted, and they still had so much left in the tank. Like, they didn't pursue the goals they wanted, the life they wanted, become the person they wanted to, because they were so busy listening to everybody else or comparing themselves to everybody else. And I know in sports, like, there's only two ways we walk off the field as an athlete. You either walk off exhausted, knowing you did everything to prepare for that game, to practice, and to play. Sometimes you come ahead on the scoreboard and sometimes you don't, but like, I gave everything I had. I'm content with my effort. And then you walk off the field knowing you cheated yourself in practice. You weren't that prepared. You maybe took a play or two off in the game. And you're always going to look at that scoreboard and wonder, what if I'd done better? What if I'd actually given my best? And that question can haunt you. I mean, it haunts athletes from a sports perspective, especially when they lose big games, big moments, because they're like, what if I'd actually trained this offseason? Would I have been in a better position? And the last thing I want for people in life is to have that same experience. I want you to get to the grave and be nothing but essentially dried up bones. I want you to have exhausted everything. And sometimes it's going to work out for you, and sometimes it may not. But the whole idea of building this competitor mindset is when it doesn't, you get back up and keep going, because you're going to exhaust it. So when you get there and we get to the end of our life, it's not a, man, I wish I'd done all this. I wish I'd given better. I wonder what I could have done. It's like, man, I gave everything I had for everyone I loved and everything I wanted, and I wouldn't trade that ride for anything.
Yeah, that definitely makes me think about Kobe Bryant and the way that he lived his life as a basketball player, and then post, what he was doing from a basketball, mentor standpoint. It's a lot of what it sounds like you're describing.
Yeah, and Kobe's story is fascinating because he, unlike a lot of players when their career ends, like, they look for that, how can I continue to pursue greatness? And for a lot of us as athletes, when sports ends, like, we just lose that competitive edge. But because Kobe had the similar mindset to Jordan in terms of, it's me against me, and I'm going to show up and I'm going to do better, he saw his post-career as, this is a challenge. I'm stepping into a new space. I'm taking this growth mindset. How can I be great over here? And then, most importantly, how can I help others? I mean, we've seen it with the college players, the girl out of Oregon that was just drafted first overall in the WNBA. Like, he mentored her. Like, he was caring about paying it forward with that next generation, because he understood, as much as people butted heads with him and he was this fierce competitor on the court, like, your legacy is defined by how you help others and what you leave behind. And so he got that, and he was exhausting everything in the pursuit of pursuing greatness to see what he was actually capable of while still paying it forward for others.
Absolutely. So with the publishing of the book, and I know you're speaking, like where do you see happening in the next couple of months? Like what is kind of like your vision for yourself? How are you applying this? What kind of, where do you stand there?
Yeah, so it's funny. This has been a daily exercise in me applying it, mainly because as the speaking side, I mean, that whole revenue stream for our business was shut off completely when COVID hit because events are not happening. They're being postponed. We expect them to start going again this summer, but canceled events we had to pay back. Events that got pushed to next year changes that prediction. And so for me, it was a challenge of how do I apply a midnight rule, which is, chapter 2 or 3 in the book is never let the hard days win. So it's me applying those things of how am I not going to let this day turn into 2 days or 3 days or a week or a month? And then how can I focus on what's in my control? How can I control those controllables? And so every day of COVID has been a chance for me to practice that. How do I rebuild my schedule? How do I set myself up for position so when we do get out of this, I'm hitting the ground running? We've had to change so much of our production was shut down for a while on the apparel side. The speaking was shut off, but the books came in. And so what I've tried to do is say, all right, I'm not traveling until potentially August at this point. It'll be the longest stretch I've had at home in a decade. Instead of being upset about it or just binging Tiger King 2 to 3 times, I'm saying, how can I actually get all those things done that I always said I wanted to do for the brand? And so we've got a productivity journal, daily planner, that pieces of it are in this book. We're building that. We're hoping to get that out this summer. I'm working on content and just video content and daily content so that we can roll out the Daily Competitor podcast, which is, Daily Stoic is fantastic with Ryan Holiday and some other groups do it. But we want to roll something out like that because we see a way to fill that need of people wanting shorter content. And I don't have the excuse that I'm traveling, I'm too busy, I have to work on this speech. So instead of focusing on what's outside of my control in that business, it's how do I apply everything I've talked about in this book? And so really where we hope to be this fall is speaking is rolling. The book is out. I'm actually working on book 2 at that point. We've got a journal, and then we still have the apparel and those pieces. So the brand will have shifted from T-shirts and tanks back in the day to really kind of being a media company that helps people build a competitor mindset. And we want to do that with the book, with the journal, with the talks, with everything like that, so that if you love a T-shirt, you're going to pick up the one you like. But if T-shirts aren't your thing, maybe you're going to buy the book, because all we care about at the end of the day is helping people learn about the importance of their choices and then craft and cultivate that mindset they need to succeed, regardless of whether we're in COVID or not.
Phenomenal. So now I know in the last, how long have you been married now?
It will be 5 years in August.
Wow. Congratulations, man.
Thanks.
So in your new, I don't know if children are in your future. Is that a part of y'all's plans?
It is. It's funny because I'm doing work in the parenting space, even though I'm not a parent yet, because that's where we're wanting to go. We have the Raising Competitors podcast for youth sports because I just love that space. And I'm so passionate about, as you know, sports and fitness. And I know how integral it is for my development and the lessons. And I just want kids to have that good experience because I know a bad parenting experience or handling of a situation, a bad coach can push a kid away from a sport and the lessons that they would learn that help them the rest of their life. So I'm getting into that space now from a teaching and just really facilitating these type conversations. And we're hoping in the next couple of years to have a few little competitors of our own running around. Until then, we keep collecting boxers. So our house is filled with pups.
Nice. Well, I definitely knew you had a heart and a vision for working with kids and all that from your posts. I know you post on Facebook questions for parents to get engaged and talk to you about that. So that's awesome. Well, kind of rounding out the interview here, what is kind of like a central message that you would like to send to people or want people to know in this time?
Yeah, I think the biggest is there's so many things online that will distract you, demotivate you. There's so many information and disinformation right now that it's easy to be overwhelmed. I want everyone to know, one, it's 100% okay to feel out of sorts because it's a different time. But I also want to challenge you with the idea that because it is a different time, you could be one of the few that take advantage of it. And it doesn't matter what's outside of your control. What matters most is what's in. And so today, this weekend, this next week, I would challenge you just to focus on your 4 controllables, which is the actions you take, the effort you give, the attitude you choose, and what you choose to focus on as well. And if you'll be super sharp with those, if you'll train that discipline, you'll find that those outside distractions tend to get quieter and move away, and you're able to make that progress so that when you get through this storm, you won't have just been someone that survived the chaos and the COVID and the quarantine. You'll actually be someone that's starting to thrive. And so that would be my biggest takeaway for everyone here, my encouragement, because there's enough negativity out there and the sky is falling that I think the ones that are focusing on what they control are finding a way to still do good, still set themselves up for success, that the last part of this year blows away the first part.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a great way to end it. We appreciate you, Jake, coming on and talking with us. And we look forward to getting your I have your book. I look forward to reading it and put it to work, and more people getting it as well. So thank you, sir.
Thanks, JT. Appreciate it.